Hello there, my name is Anthony Barokas of StreamTech. Today I have an interesting discussion with Jason Jenkins of Studiomatic. He makes this all-in-one, one-button studio where you can go in, make a recording, and walk away with a video. But what does it take to actually do that? And how long was the process for him to figure it out? We're going to find out in just a minute. Thank you, Jason, for being on the show today. And for those who may not have yet heard about the Studiomatic, the one-button studio that you've created, give us some behind the scenes, give us a little bit of information about it.
Sure. Well, my journey with the one-button studio started 5 or 6 years ago. I was working for the DVE store, an audio-video reseller. Rest in peace, they're now out of business, but I was working for them, and we came across this solution called the One Button Studio that Penn State had built, and later we heard the story that this whole idea actually originated at an EDUCAUSE conference. So Penn State took that idea and they actually built something they called the One Button Studio, and they wrote a little Mac app for it, and they shared their plans and their design with the whole world on their website, and it became popular, particularly on the East Coast, with colleges and universities over there, to build a little one-button studio. And this is probably about 10 or so years ago that they originally did this. So when I was working with the DVE store, we saw this system and we thought, this is pretty cool, but it's kind of a pain to build because you have to purchase like 60 different parts from all these different vendors. You have to order a custom cabinet and wait 6 weeks to get it. And it was just all this stuff. But we thought, you know what, maybe we can package it all together and make it a kit and make it easy for people to buy, right? One-click purchase. So I built a one-button studio based on Penn State's specifications, waited 6 weeks for the custom cabinet, did the whole deal. And by that time, their system was several years old. And I just discovered that some of the hardware, like the button itself, wasn't compatible with the latest version of Mac OS. And their app was crashing, and you know, there's some Blackmagic driver conflicts possibly, and other things going on, and I couldn't get it to work reliably. And I thought, I can't in good conscience sell this to anybody as a solution, right? It's not going to work. And so I, being someone who was actually designing some live switching systems for customers, and using a Blackmagic ATEM switchers, I was familiar with this software called Mimo Live, which is a Mac, a live switching, live streaming app. And I thought, you know what, I bet I could use Mimo Live as the basis, like the engine for this, and build a better one-button studio, one that would actually do live compositing, because the original Penn State version just recorded you with a blank background or a green screen if you happen to have a green screen set up, and then you had to go. So their system, you would actually have to edit then too. Yeah, so you actually had to go edit it. Now they have since gone on and made a one button studio version 2. However, this version is purely in-house. They're not sharing that with anybody else. But I've been working on my one button studio systems for, as I said, about the last 5 years. I spent probably a year and a half on the very first version. So spent a lot of time building up to that first version, getting all the automation down, and just making it really easy to use.
And I'm curious because yes, you have, like an integrator background, the technology, the different pieces, and it took you a year to get it all figured out. Imagine somebody in a school sitting there saying, oh, we'll just follow these instructions and buy these pieces and they'll go together.
I had one one customer actually specifically say, yes, we could have built one of our own, but yeah, it would have taken us a year and it wouldn't have been as good. So I get it. Sometimes there's people that they have more time and more energy than they have budget, and so they want to build something on their own, and that's great. I think it's great when people tinker and build their own stuff. But I also have, my customers, they buy the Studiomatic One Button Studio because it's a turnkey system and everything's there. And sometimes they often even hire me to come install it as well. So they just want the whole solution, and yeah, one click, right? Make it happen.
So let's talk about the process. But what does it do? So it looks like somebody can walk up, push a button, do their presentation, and then walk away with a finished like composite, as if they did it in a class with PowerPoint and everything, and somebody live switched it and stuff like that.
Yeah, so the idea is that it's, I call it, an automated interactive presentation recording studio. So, and I've got two systems that I've developed and I'm selling. The One Button Studio Pro, which is like a full room system. The One Button Studio Go, which is a smaller desk-based system that has a smaller footprint that can more easily be moved from one place to another if desired. But they both have similar automation as far as you walk into the room or the space, and the camera actually recognizes a human face and turns the studio lights on automatically. So they don't even have to turn the studio lights on. It happens automatically. And they have instructions on the screen every step of the way. It tells them what to do next. Load your PowerPoint and configure your video. So they either plug their own laptop in as a PowerPoint source, or the One Button Studio Pro has actually a built-in Mac that I call the presenter Mac. So they can download something, they can load it there, and whatever shows up on that screen is going to come across as a picture-in-picture behind them as their presentation. So they have options to move the elements around on the screen, to choose a background, to choose a watermark logo. And of course, for a given customer or school, they set up what those options are. Like there's an admin for the system that will put in some, scenes from the campus or whatever they want to put for their backgrounds. And that's what becomes available to the user when they come in. And they just get to cycle through the options and pick one that they like. So when they've got the screen set up, the instructions are there to tell them to just hit the big red button, and they do that, and they get a recording countdown, and the recording light comes on when they're recording, and they go through their presentation, they click through their slides, they do their thing, and when they're done, they hit the button again, the recording stops. And in the case of the One Button Studio Pro, it actually, what it does is it makes a copy of that recording and almost instantaneously dumps a copy of it onto the presentation Mac where they have it, and they can just drag and drop it, upload it to OneDrive or Google Drive or wherever they want to store it. They just drag and drop it, and there it is. They can immediately preview what they've done and play it back, so they can look at it and hear it and decide if they want to keep it or not. With the case of the One Button Studio Go, we have it's even more hands-off, automated. So it is like a little recording kiosk, essentially. When the user decides they want to keep a video, they hit the save button, and then the system actually immediately starts to upload that video, and then it generates a QR code that they just scan with their phone, and they enter their email address, and they get a link sent to them where they can go download their video in at full quality. So
are you offering cloud service with this as well, where that gets bounced around?
It's essentially yes. It's just what we've done is I've worked with the MemoLab developers, and they've got a new output destination that connects to Vimeo. So I'm just using a Vimeo account to store those, and it's just a temporary storage spot essentially. So, but it gets sent there immediately, and then they go download it, and then in a week or two, wherever we set it to, it it gets wiped off of the Vimeo account. So
Okay. So in terms of like, it sounds like it's really the core basis of this Mimo Live. It's a streaming application, right? But you're primarily using it for recording, though, right?
yeah, I mean it's recording, switching, streaming. It's some people on the Windows side of things are familiar with vMix. I think you're familiar with vMix. So it's similar in a lot of capabilities in what it can do, but it's on the Mac, and I'm a Mac guy, so I gravitate toward Mac apps, and I just really love the interface and the capabilities, and the fact that the Mimo Live developers are just two really cool guys that are willing to add features for me and just customize the app for my needs, and so it's amazing. I
Well,
call them the
it sounds like though that in addition to like the Mimo stuff, like you said, the instructions and the. Do you have like an additional app or additional code, or like what is this other process that's being put together?
yeah. So there is another custom app. It's just called the One Button Studio Controller app that does some additional things. Although as Mimo Live has matured, more and more of it is happening directly in Mimo Live. So Mimo Live has actually taken over some of the things that this other app was doing previously, just because its automation capabilities have expanded. So it's pretty cool, and those guys are great to work with.
And how do you handle audio? Somebody walks into a space, they don't put a microphone on. I guess you've got audio built into the space.
So again, going back to the concept of a one-button studio, it's as hands-off as possible, right? We don't want people to have to put on a wireless body pack and like turn it on and make sure the batteries are good and all this other thing, because the space is just meant to be used by the presenter that walks in by themselves. There's no crew there to help them. It's a self-serve studio. So with the case of the One Button Studio Pro, yeah, the microphone is ceiling mounted. It comes down on a boom, is boomed overhead. So that's how the audio is picked up there. So.
But how do you manage levels? You can get someone who's quiet talking versus someone who's just got this really loud presenter type voice and they just speak really loud.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, loud is usually better unless it's too loud. But generally, we just the system is set to a mid range. And although I did a few months back have a request by a customer to be able to adjust the audio levels. So actually, all I did, it only took me a few minutes, was to add an audio level control to the control panel, and now they have a little slider where you can adjust the microphone sensitivity up or down. So.
And what type of people, like what markets does this typically serve? Is it more education? Is it more, because it sounds like, if somebody had a church or something and they just wanted to do a sermon or something like that, they could walk in, hit one button, do their sermon, have some, verses behind them and speak about that and everything. And they could do this every day.
Certainly, I can. So historically, most of our customers have been colleges and universities. So, and in some cases, they purchase these purely for student use. They put them in the library and they open it up for students, so the student can actually book the room for an hour and go in and just record whatever they want. And in other cases, it's primarily for faculty to create online course content. And so they have it set aside for them. In other cases, it's mixed use, so faculty or students can come in and use the studio. With my latest version, I'm actually getting more corporate interest as well. So I'm building 2 One Button Studio Pro systems right now that are going to end up at the Sherwin-Williams corporate headquarters in Cleveland. So that's interesting to see that shift and to see more corporate interest in these systems. I haven't had a church buy one yet, but that's not impossible. The price point is such that it would need to be a church that has some money, and I know they don't all have money, so it is what it is. But
Right. Well, time is money, and it sounds like there's been considerable time put in to make this thing as simple and as to flow as well as it does. And how would you say over the course of time, like when you started this journey and you had this vision, and how have things changed? Has it been like directed by what the customer wants? Has it been more directed by what how the industry has changed? How has this flow worked out?
Certainly, it's been a mix of things. Certainly, I always want to listen to my customers because sometimes they have really good ideas, and occasionally they might have an idea, and I could say, you know what, that's not a good idea. You should do this instead. But but I do like to at least be open to and listen to what they have to say, because ultimately I need to serve them. So one of the things I struggle with is having customers that want to turn it into something else that it's not designed to be. And it has the capability where, yes, you could add another camera to it. Yes, you could do this and do this. But then suddenly it's a custom integration, right? And
feature creep is something that gets everyone. I'm right there with you. In the middle of COVID, I built these remote kits so that we would have a better camera, a better microphone for the person that we sent them out to, and they fit into a little briefcase. All they had to do was plug it in and hit the power button. Nice. Everything else was done remotely. But then it was, well, can we record on them and then download the file? Well, can we do a green screen on? I'm like, that wasn't part of the original specification that the computer right. we put in there was for the original task.
Yeah, I had a customer just recently that it was like, yeah, can we add another camera? Can we turn this into a podcast studio? With multiple cameras and I was like, well, yes, you could, but then it wouldn't be a one-button studio anymore, and it wouldn't be easy to use, and you would have to have somebody running it, as opposed to it being automated, right?
Right.
So anyway, I think I've talked them out of doing that, because the whole purpose behind the purchase was to have this automated, really easy to use recording studio, right? And if you start changing it, then it becomes something else. So you have to decide what you really want, I guess.
When you started doing this, and I got a couple questions around this part. You started doing this, and you saw what they were doing. What made you? Obviously you had a Mac background, but there's a bunch of different Mac applications. What made you pick one application over the other?
So I first came across Mimo Live because I was starting to use the ATEM, the Blackmagic Design ATEM switcher, and I wasn't happy with the available methods of getting graphics into the ATEM, like the built-in stuff. So I was looking for better ways of adding graphics to, into an ATEM production. And I came across Mimo Live, and they actually had a way of superimposing graphics with their software into an ATEM using separate key and fill signals. So I thought that was really cool. So I started playing with Mimo Live, and they were totally willing to give me a free license so that I could just do stuff with it and make tutorials. And anyway, they were just really great to work with, and I loved the way the software was laid out. It's not a old school traditional,
A bus and B bus type of video layout.
Yeah, exactly. It's a layer based thing. It's almost like Photoshop. Like if this layer is on top of the other layer, it's going to show up on top if it's live, right? And it just really connected with me as far as the interface goes. And then again, these two guys, I call them the bodacious Bradenbach brothers of Boinks. So Oliver and Achim, they're just great to work with. And So being familiar with that software, I just thought, you know what? I'm pretty sure I could make this work. So I just went for it.
All right. So it
And
was sort of like, you kind of found one product and the usefulness of the product kind of drew you in further. It wasn't like you selected a couple different things and, worked from that.
right, and knowing and already having built a little bit of a relationship with the developers, I had a level of confidence that if I needed some help from them, I could probably get it. And that's not the case with all software for sure,
No, no.
right?
And
Some
have
companies are
you
just
hit
too big.
bottlenecks that they've had to solve?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Um, and like for instance, we just recently did this. They just recently created this connection with Vimeo for me for the One Button Studio Go. So now, granted, that took some considerable development, and so I actually essentially split. They determined, like, you know what, it's like this is the monetary value of the development we need to do to make this happen, and we'll split it with you. So I paid half of it, and they
Interesting,
developed
interesting.
it for me. So
Because
so
I would be willing to bet, though, that there have been features that you've asked for that in the end can really benefit all the other users of, you know, Mimo Live.
yeah. So that's the consideration. That's part of the consideration. And we had that exact conversation when talking about this Vimeo connection. They're like, well, we've had other people ask for something similar before. And so we can justify this because we know it'll be another good selling point for Mimo Live. So yeah, let's go ahead and do it. And it's nice to hear that because then I feel like, oh, okay, my ideas aren't like completely out there. They're actually in line with
Yeah,
what
yeah,
other
yeah,
people actually
definitely.
want. So,
And I had a similar situation in that I was doing a live remote with vMix, and the way it was built, this is 2 versions ago, the way it was designed was that it would give you a Windows alert when you typed a message into the chat. But the problem was I was switching the remote and the host was trying to send me a text and it was on another screen off to the side. And she's sending me a text saying, bring up this particular image, bring up this image. And I'm not hearing it because it's not making a sound when she texted me. It only makes a sound when I type in a message. And I wrote the authors, they've got an online forum. And I said, this is silly. If it doesn't need to alert me when I type a message because I know I typed the message. It needs to
right,
alert me.
exactly.
It needs to give me a beep when someone else types a message, so I know. Let me look over. Oh,
Yeah,
okay, yeah, okay, and do that.
yeah,
And we went back and forth a couple of times, and it was kind of interesting that an update came out, and then I got an email and says you'll like this latest update. And sure
nice.
enough, they had
Gotta love it.
reversed where the beep occurs. It doesn't occur when I type, it occurs when they type. So every other
Nice.
message that's not mine gives me a little ding, ding, just like every other chat message,
Yeah,
like Facebook or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Nice. Yeah, it's great when you can reach the developers. I mean, that's that's worth that's gold right there. So
Yeah, and it's good to find companies that support their products like that too and really listen. Because there's companies that produce products, but when you hit a bug or a feature that just needs to be a little bit better, and you tell them, and it just falls on deaf ears for so long, you kind of give up on the whole product just because of this one stumbling block.
right. Yeah, if you feel like it'll never be solved or you just have no idea if it ever will be, it's like hard to go forward, right?
So when you picked up that and you've got the Mac, and I assume other hardware has changed over time because I saw a picture that you had
Yeah.
posted, and this is a complex build. It's you've got like multiple components, you've got capture devices and Ethernet routing between the devices and everything.
Yeah.
It almost when like in the beginning when you said that you found the plans, and I'm just like, there are people who would, definitely let's go and try and build this. But then I think, like you've discovered, there's a whole market out there who are like, listen, I just want the solution. I don't want to have to learn about the
Yeah.
video apps and the networking and the upload and all this stuff. I just want my problem solved.
Yeah, that's true. And interestingly, I'm also getting some interest around a DIY system where I would essentially sell them all the parts and give them instructions on how to build it and how to install it. And so they could get it for, roughly half the price, doing all the labor themselves. So that might become a reality as well. So
Yeah, but it also then takes considerable time on your part to build the tutorial.
true. Although I've been creating content as I've gone along here with that in mind. So anyway, that's we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. But
It's like I just did a show on streaming, and it's sort of like, well, if you went streaming, you could buy a box from Teradek and stream to Teradek. It's super easy, turnkey, or
yeah,
buy a
yeah,
live view and it does the streaming. Or you could buy a kilo view and set up your own server and open the ports and build the server yourself. And I'm like, okay, it's free, but time is money.
right. So yeah, that decision has to be made. What's it worth to you? So
Exactly. When you first got into this and you first decided to build one, was it with the intent of, it's like, oh, I kind of understand the concept here. I want to build it. Was it as a proof of concept, or was it, because you were working at a reseller, were you sitting there saying, we can market this? Was it as, were you already planning on saying, I want to do a final product, or were you like, I'm just really just curious about this thing?
it was an actual investment in time and money for them they essentially paid me for a year or more to spend a lot of time on building the original Penn State version and then realizing I need to build something else that's different. And so there was a lot of investment on their part in having me do that. So the idea was that there would be a return on that investment, and then that we would sell these systems. And I actually got to the point where I had built the first system. It was like 95% done, and I was confident that I could complete it. We actually had it up on the website, but I was burned out for a variety of reasons, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to go do something else. So I actually left and was headed in a different direction. And then just like in the middle of the night, this school in Iceland, of all places, buys one off the website. And so I thought, oh man, okay, maybe this is a viable product. Maybe we could actually sell these. I guess I need to go finish it so that I can send it to them. so, so that got me back into it. And then I just thought, you know what? I like the concept. I really feel like it's going to resonate with customers. So I'm just going to go for it.
So this is now your full time, day and night. It's sort of like configuring, building. I called it when I build systems, I call it Imagineering. Like,
hmm.
it's Disney called it when that's what they use when they're talking about building theme parks. But I also, it's like, I imagine it should work like this. I just have to find what products would enable me to get it to
Mm-hmm.
work like this. And then it's a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
engineering. You have the imagination. Yes, I'm going to build this little suitcase, and when you open it up, there's going to be a screen, and there's the light, and and then it's 2 months of like trying to find parts that work.
Oh yeah, there's tons of R&D has gone into this, and it's continual actually, because there's things that happen, like the lights that I was using uh, were discontinued, right? And they were replaced by some, very similar looking ones, but they were RGBW, and the price tripled. And I didn't need the whole rainbow, of colors. I just needed good bicolor studio lights, right? And so
Right.
I was like, okay, I got to find new lights, So then you start that process, trying to figure out, okay, what are some other lights that are going to hang from the ceiling and look fairly neat and tidy? Like cable management is a thing. Like how am I going to get power to them? There's, all these, they can't be too big and too heavy because I'm hanging from the drop ceiling, right? There's all these different factors that you have to figure out. And so there's just stuff like that that happens where suddenly a product you've been using for a while just isn't there anymore. Or, and then there's Mac OS updates that change things. And it's, yeah. And so you're like, oh, okay, we got to figure this one out.
So
like for
yeah,
instance,
yeah.
I'll give you a for instance. So on my last build with the One Button Studio Pro, so I use a DeckLink card, right, for video in and out from Blackmagic Design. So they have their desktop video software that is required to run the DeckLink. But for whatever reason, a combination of I don't know if it's the OS or if it's the Blackmagic drivers or some mix of those two things, the system was not automatically recognizing the DeckLink when it booted up, which is a problem because this whole system boots itself up in the morning and it's ready to go when you walk in, right? If it can't see the DeckLink card, that's an issue. Now, I found an app that Blackmagic provides where you can basically kickstart it if you run this app, and it brings up the DeckLink card. I'm like, okay, I can just make an Automator app and have that, as soon as it boots up, it runs that app automatically. It'll kickstart the DeckLink and everything will be fine. No, because every time it does that kickstart, it comes up at its default like mapping, like input and output mapping, which is not how I was. I had a custom mapping going on with the DeckLink, so that wouldn't work. So I ended up actually having to go to a higher level DeckLink card that has the 8 ins and outs.
Oh wow!
So that I could use the default mapping. I would have enough ins and outs that I could just set it to default, plug in where I needed to, and everything would work. So that's how I had to set the system up. So now I've got this app that kickstarts it. It comes up as default, but everything is lined up where it needs to be, and it all goes. So it's just stuff like that. Like out of nowhere, suddenly something doesn't work, right? So you got to figure out the solution. So
and the real challenge is, because you or any integrator who wants to build these things, we don't control the operating system, we don't control the hardware, we don't control the drivers, we don't control any of this, yet our business relies on all of this stuff working beautifully together. It's always like, when I use vMix or whatever and Windows insists on an update, I'm like, geez, no, it's working right now. Do not change the system.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's not always, it doesn't always happen, but it was easier with previous versions where there was essentially thumb drive delivery where the system operated with a thumb drive and that's how they would take their video. But now with these cloud-based systems where you're uploading the video, the systems do need to be on the internet. And so a lot of customers are like, well, we have to do the OS updates. And so yes, every once in a while you get a major OS update that will mess something up, and it's got to be fixed. So.
Yeah, it is a real challenge, especially when these are inside of environments where they require things to be patched and updated for security and things like that. You can't just say, oh, well, it's got the OS from 2 years ago, but yet there's a security update from 2 years ago that says don't leave it at this thing. And so do you administer them remotely? I mean, is that like an ongoing service?
So I do offer support for these systems. So I will log into them remotely if they need support and help them out in that way. I offer a year of support included with each system, and then they can extend that support if they want to for an additional cost. So So yeah, I use AnyDesk and able to log in with somebody on the other end to allow me access. Then I can go in and check things out and fix things up if they get messed up.
Yeah, because that's the thing that even we had, was that we were using a Surface tablet as our camera and screen, and we found a light that you could control, an external light that you could control from within. There was an application you could run, and then you could paint the colors. So if somebody was next to a window, I could make the light more blue. If somebody was inside, I could make the light more tungsten. And that was great. And then Windows released an update, and suddenly the app didn't work. And it's like, it's a never-ending saga of like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
It is, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And same with Mac OS, yeah.
And then, like you says, we don't control the lights, the interface. Like, certain cards that were available will eventually be discontinued and replaced with new cards. Certain, cameras, certain anything will be updated and new models will come out. Now, it doesn't make the old ones break, but at the same time, it changes the build, and it makes it difficult in terms of like, I put this card in here and now I want to build another one, but I can't because that card that I put in that one doesn't exist anymore. I could see if I can source an older one to make the design consistent, or I have to completely re-engineer how things work to adapt to this new card.
Yeah. I'm constantly updating. I have an assembly document essentially that goes through all the steps, and so I'm constantly making little changes to that and updating it as needed so that when I go through it again, I know where I'm at and what I need to do.
It sounds like you're wearing a lot of hats. I mean, what is your background before, working at the store and having this idea? Was it as a producer? Was it as an engineer? Was it as a builder, a maker, or?
Yeah, so I went to school and I've got a bachelor's degree in digital arts and filmmaking. So I was a video producer for 20 years and just did a lot of, TV commercials and promotional videos, and didn't really get into doing live video until I started working for the DVE store, and then was designing live video systems for people. So yeah, just as a video producer that's my background. So not an engineer, but I've always been a tinkerer, and so it's a nice combination of, when I was a kid, I was always, if something electronic broke, or maybe even if it didn't, I was taking it apart and seeing what was inside and poking around and was blowing breakers in the house on a fairly regular basis and burning holes in my carpet with soldering irons and.
So I guess at your house you're the Mr. Fix-It.
I do, yes. I do tend to fix things, although I do have my limits. Sometimes I'm just like, you know what? We're gonna hire somebody to fix this.
Absolutely. I'm the same way. It's sort of like I can do my extent of like networking at home is let's reboot the router. After that, it's not my problem. And we had a plumbing issue. I looked under the sink. Yep, I'm calling a plumber. Yep.
Right. Yeah, you got to know your limits and when to call in the expert, right? So
yes, and there are certain things that's like, I don't mess with water because you did the wrong thing. You've got a house filled with water, and then you've got all kinds of other problems, And the other thing I don't do is I don't mess with AC. Oh, you just replace the breaker. Nope, not replacing the breaker. I'm going to hire an electrician to open that box and touch those things.
Yeah, I think in the last year I've replaced 4 parts on our washing machine, and it's 10 years old, so it's getting to that point where I'm like, do I really want to put any more money into it, or is it time to replace it? It's getting to that level.
Exactly. Well, it sounds very interesting. Like, where do you want to take this from here? Like, do you hope that this expands into more markets? Do you see the product being divided up into even more categories and expanding, and a crew of 10 of you building these things and configuring, or where's it going?
That's a really interesting question, and I'm not sure I even know the answer 100% because I am, well, I guard my family time is important to me. Let's put it that way. So
As it
part
should
of me,
be.
part of me does not want it to get too big, right? I'm, at the level of like building and selling and installing a couple of these a month, I can do great, right? So it doesn't necessarily need to get any bigger than that, but there's always the potential. Like an AV integrator could realize, this is perfect for whatever client, big corporate client, call me up and say, we want 50 of these. and then I'd be like, oh boy, okay. All right, time to hire some people, right?
Yes, it's that perennial small business issue of scalability.
Right. And that's why I really try to document things. I've got you can see part of it in the background here. I got a little overhead camera rig. So when I put an assembly of parts together, I can actually record it and talk about what I'm doing and show the whole process. So, and then I've done full videos while I've done an installation, like every step of the installation. This is what I'm doing. This is what's next. This is how it goes. So try to document.
You've kind of ramped up a little bit to have an assistant, or someone who could build as well as you once they've gone through the training, and then you could spend more time on managing.
Yeah, and I do have a couple of sons. Well, I've got 5 kids in total, but two older sons who are one is 21 and one is 19, and they. The oldest, the 21-year-old, does work for me occasionally and help me build systems. He's also in school right now, so that's like his main gig. But it's good to have some help around if I need it, and if I need to, yeah, I could hire some additional help. I really like the way things are right now, where it's not too crazy, but it's enough to make a decent living. And I've got my little studio here, which is a mile and a half from my house on Whidbey Island. And it's just a beautiful place to live and work, and it's pretty nice.
There's something to be said for equilibrium. I don't need it to be bigger. It's going good, but we always don't know what the future holds too. Because goodness gracious, if you did get that order of 50 for Microsoft, you'd be like, that's do I take it or do I not?
I mean, I feel like I would take it and then ramp things up at least temporarily, right? I mean, it would probably take me 6 months to maybe longer to fulfill that, but yeah. So I say 50 because we actually did a couple years ago. We had one of our systems at Infocom. And there was an AV integrator guy that actually was really interested. And he was like, how soon could you get me 50 of these? He actually asked that question, and we're like, holy crap! I don't even know how to answer that. And that never panned out, honestly. But he was hard to get a hold of after the show. And by the time I did, he had actually forgotten who he was thinking of when he had asked that question. so anyway, but the potential is out there. It taught me one thing, like the potential for that is out there, and I have to be ready for it if it does happen. So
yes, and that's the key thing with anything we do. It's sort of like I could just be doing live streaming, but then I never know if somebody's going to call and say, hey, listen, we love your stuff and we'd love you to be in charge of this weekly production. And I'm just like, I'm not quite set up for that, So
yeah.
We never know what's going to be asked of us. But anyway, Jason, I really appreciate you taking the time to tell me not just about the one button studio, but the process of like thinking of it, building it, and managing it, and all the little intricacies, within all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to chat with you, Anthony.
Thank you again to Jason for coming on Stream Tech Conversations and telling his story, because we all have ideas, but what does it take to actually make them happen? What technology, what business, what manufacturing, what engineering, all these different things have to come together for us to realize our vision. Maybe you have a vision, and what are you going to do to make it happen? My name is Anthony Barocas for Stream Tech. Thanks for watching.